Welcome to The Practical Intuitive, where each Monday at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 Eastern, where host Robin Fritz explores mind, body, and spirit for the real world. Because we are all intuitives and healers, and we must all learn to love ourselves and live that love every day. Robin is a trained and certified intuitive and spiritual consultant and hypnotherapist with an international practice based in Seattle, Washington. As the Practical Intuitive, she covers personal and business intuition, animal communication, mediumship, space clearing, past life regression, shamanic insights, energy healing, soul choice. It's all here. Readings, healings, and funny, warm, thought-provoking conversations. It's Robin Fritz, the Practical Intuitive, helping you mastermind body and spirit for the real world. No ifs, ands, buts, or BS ever.
Welcome to the Practical Intuitive, Mind, Body, Spirit for the Real World. It's Robin Fritz. We're live on a rainy day in Seattle, Washington, and I'm looking forward to sharing this hour with you. As you know, if you've listened to my podcast or checked out my website, my work is about helping people tap their innate intuitive and healing abilities because we all have them and we're just not using them like we could be. When we do, it really matters in our lives and in the lives of those around us. So today it is my great honor to welcome thought leader Nick Jankel, and we'll be talking about finding peace, love, and purpose without religion, what the concept of spiritual atheism is, how that matters in our lives today. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But as you know, each week when we start the show, we start with a quick meditation with a crystal Fallon, the citrine Lemurian quartz, to get you grounded and balanced in this space with us and opening up sacred space for conversations that help change our lives. So as you take your attention to the top of your head, imagine that you're connecting with this rare crystalline energy and that we're bringing mind, body, and spirit together. So you're connecting with this energy, however your intuition works most strongly. So you may see pictures, feel his energy, hear him chatting with you, or simply know that you're connected with him. So take your attention to the top of your head, breathe down your body, head to toe, let the cares of the day wash away. Breathing down from the top of your head, down your face, your shoulders, your chest, your hips, your knees, and your feet. The top of your head to the bottom of your feet. Just feel the cares, the blockages going away. And now as you breathe up from the bottom of your feet to the top of your head, imagine you're connecting to Fallon's energy and it's filling you up, moving up from your feet, past your knees, your hips, your chest, your face, and the top of your head. So I want to thank you for joining me today, and I, at this point, would like to welcome my special guest today. So Nick Jankel can speak for himself, which he will do here shortly.
I will.
He's an award-winning thought leader, an author, and a professional speaker, and my gosh, he's done a lot. So Nick, why don't you tell us what you're up to?
A lot actually at the moment. It's
awesome.
It's a very busy time for me. So I've just released this book that you've mentioned, Spiritual Atheist,
right,
which has been a labor of love, a journey of love, a few interesting challenges on the path, and lots of other stuff going on, and all around this key insight, which is to help people rebalance their lives and the world, to include things that are beyond science, but not not ignoring science, and so really balancing this materialist world,
right?
With
Interesting.
this consciousness.
Right, and you're calling in today from London.
Yes,
and Wow. And so you've done a lot of writing, you work with a lot of big organizations, and you've been on this journey of personal discovery, spiritual discovery, the whole mind, body, spirit thing, right? And you came up with this life philosophy of spiritual atheism. And as I was looking at that, I'm thinking, I think that's kind of what I...
It's interesting.
Which
it's
a journey, right?
Really, yeah. I mean, it's been a very interesting book because it's really brought out different things in different people I've spoken to and met. And just,
well, you're combining...
journey that itself.
Exactly. You're combining your knowledge of ancient wisdom traditions, religion, spiritual insight, modern spiritual thought, even a little bit of science, and it all comes together, right?
Right. It does.
So
it took me a long time to bring it together.
Right. And gee, there's a whole lot of things that I want to talk with you today about, even going back to the Industrial Revolution and what kind of happened to everybody then. But for those who are listening, for people who are searching on this path of really growing our souls. I mean, that's what I think we're all here for. We're all here to grow our souls in our current bodies as humans. That's an eternal quest. We do it. We come back again and again to work on that in different bodies. But what does spiritual atheism mean to you? How would you define it to this audience who's going like, what? Do you not believe in God?
So,
which is fine.
You asked me the question, you said, we're all here to grow our souls. And
exactly.
I guess part of this journey for me is 15 years ago, I would have not understood what you meant, and I would have walked away from this conversation very quickly. I grew up as I grew up in London, which is a very atheistic society. My father is a very hardcore scientist and rationalist, and I went to study science, and I still love science, and so nothing I say or do ever contradicts science. But what I do believe is that science has only got a methodology to understand part of the world. It doesn't have a methodology to understand our own inner experience.
That's true.
So a scientist can say, when you're happy, your brain lights up here, or a scientist can say, people who have purpose have less dementia, both of which are true. This is real. But what a scientist can't say, because science wasn't designed to say, was how you should feel and shift and change how you feel inside and your experience of consciousness in the world. And so then you go, okay, well, what's the part of what can I do to change my experience, to change my sense of connection, my sense of belonging, my sense of being loved, loving myself? Well, how do I change that stuff? And a scientist will say, well, I can't tell you, and actually I probably don't even believe any of that stuff is true. And that never worked for me. So I was like, well, doesn't make sense,
what are they missing?
Yeah, what are they missing? And so I actually was lucky to study the history of science, and I went back in time. I got in my metaphorical time travel hot tub, and if you go back in time to the beginning of when science was developed, people were saying, listen, to make facts about the world, we've got to stop worrying about consciousness and thought and feeling, because it gets in the way of all our scientific data. So let's just discount that whole thing. Yeah, just discount feeling and consciousness and experience. I don't think they said it doesn't exist. They just said, we can't get into that stuff. It's too complicated. And
you can't quantify it.
Able to measure. Yeah, you can't quantify it.
You can't measure it.
Therefore, you can't do science. And then over hundreds of years, in an effort to rid, often the scientific and public sphere, to get rid of science, to get rid of religion, the scientists have actually ended up sort of destroying the baby with the bathwater and saying, well, nothing exists outside of what you can measure. And right now, if you're listening to this,
Right.
you know that you have an experience that can't be measured. Unless you say, you know, I'm 9 out of 10 awake. That's not really a good measurement. That's just an experience.
Right.
So you know, like I know, that my consciousness is real. But how do you square that away with science that says we live in a meaningless universe? So that was really my task of the last 15 years, is to try and understand, can I be a reasonable, science-loving man, and also be absolutely clear in a rigorous way that my experiences that people will call spiritual are real. And when I say a spiritual experience...
Right. I have a question about that.
Yeah.
You know, I think we're very much alike in many ways. I was raised Catholic by very conservative Catholic people in a small town in Oregon here on the west coast of the United States.
Yeah.
And my dad was a businessman, a pharmacist, so he was a scientist,
Yeah.
and he was very able to divorce his business from his religion. And religion told him what to do, and he did it. And he also managed his business. And, you know, I bought into that for a long time. I even wanted to be a nun at one point. But I've gone completely crazy on the other end. And I don't really understand. I've pondered this a lot, so I think you're the person to ask this question of, if he could divorce, you know, his belief from his science, so to speak, and I know a lot of scientists are religious people.
Yeah.
Why are we getting hung up on science?
Interesting. Well, I actually believe this separation of science and religion is actually part of the problem that we're dealing with in the world.
I agree.
I don't know your dad. I'm sure he was you know, a great guy. But I remember being I was on a panel. I did a talk at Aspen Ideas Festival a couple of years ago in the middle of Colorado, and this scientist was there. He's a Christian scientist, and he and I were talking about science and spirituality. Can they coexist? The challenge I've got with the sort of keep them separate, it's called two magisteria. You've got the sort of kingdom of religion and the kingdom of science, and I keep them separate. So when I'm doing science, like your father, when I'm measuring pipettes of, you know, chemicals, I'm a scientist, and when I come home, I'm a Christian religious man, and I go to church and I do all that stuff.
Right.
And the thing, there's two big challenges for me. One is an ethical or moral challenge, which is I believe that people who do that, who split those out, I believe that they then don't allow their morality to influence their work enough. And for me, every decision we make in business, every decision we make at school, every decision we make, full stop, is a moment where love and truth is either coming into the world or it's not. And so this sort of idea
or they accept the whole concept and they never realize there was a difference or a dichotomy between the two.
Could you? Yes, that's possible. But
you know, I believe, Well, I've seen people like my dad. Yeah, go ahead.
The bigger challenge I found is actually I believe that we only live in one world, not two. And I don't believe there's a world of science and a world of religion. I believe there's one reality, and we have to understand that reality. So for me, the difficult bit is saying, okay, science must be exploring one part of reality, and then when I meditate or when I dance or when I make love or any of the things that I do within my spiritual practices, then that has to be insights into the same world. And that's what's been difficult for me. It's actually philosophically, it's much easier to separate out spiritual life and my practical life of, you know, bank statements and money and work. And so I go to yoga at the weekend and I do all that in my spiritual life, and then I just go into the system and work. And actually that for me is part of the challenge we're facing. We've got this duality in the world between our spiritual world and our material world. And so we're operating in our business lives and in the systems, whether it's using plastic or, you know, or energy or all the things that we know aren't working. We've got this split, and actually the whole thing is we need to bring our intuition, as you might call it, and I do in the book. We need to bring that intuitive sense of what is being asked of us in the moment from the universe, what the emergence is asking us to do. And we need to bring it into every decision. You know, every decision we make to spend money, every decision we make to get a job or hire someone or whatever it is, we have to bring that flash of loving truth into the moment, and not just keep it for Sundays. And
well,
that is a really challenging thing.
And I think that's true. And I've seen people like my dad. Well, we lost my brother when he was 14 to leukemia, and I saw my parents that challenged their belief system, but they always managed to incorporate how they viewed their religion into their world, whether it was a family life or a business life. These days, my parents both died over 20-some years ago. These days, it seems like you almost have to justify that way of life, or you have to justify one or the other. And I look at science, and I have so many experiences that can't even possibly be defined by science. And I'm like, fine, I like my electricity. I like to be able to drive my car. I like all of the things that science gives me, healthcare and everything else. Yeah. But there's things on both sides that can't fully be explained. I find it interesting that there are scientists out there right now trying to quantify things like precognition, there's no way they could quantify my experiences. They'd call me crazy. And yet I'm like, okay, but where do we come together? Where do we create this whole worldview? And that's why I talk about mind, body, and spirit. It all has to come together in some ways, or we have split personality, schizophrenic society. Right? Absolutely.
And actually, in the intro to my book, I talk about this split in our. So we've got one. I believe we have one thing called, I call it body mind. So it's one thing. It's not two. It's not a mind and a body, and they somehow connect in the pineal gland, as someone said. Exactly. It's just one thing. But I believe we've got this divorce within us. It's like having we're like our consciousness is like a child of divorce. At all times, it's got this one heartfelt feeling of interconnectivity and meaning and intimacy with life, with the world, and then we have this mind that's very rigorous and likes to have spreadsheets and all the other stuff that it likes.
Needs to have all of that. How do we pull it together?
Yeah, we've got to put it together.
We're going to have to.
The agony. It's agony to have the split.
Yeah, it is. Hang on, we got a break. We'll be right back after the break with Nick Jankel and talking about how do we find peace, love, and purpose without religion.
Conscious connection to a more mindful world. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living, a chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
Hi, this is New Age Grammy winner Paul Avgerinos. Thanks for listening to OMTimes Radio, and please support my peaceful healing music with a purchase at iTunes, Amazon, or wherever you shop for fine music. Just put my name into the search engine, Paul Avgerinos. A, V like Victor, G like George, E-R-I-N-O-S. You can also visit me at roundskymusic.com. Thanks for listening, and I'm wishing you the brightest of blessings.
In the wake of a disaster, what one thing can you send that will help people the most? A blanket, a tent, a sandbag, a doctor. Actually, if you send a monetary donation, you send all these things. Even a small donation can make a big impact and can quickly become exactly what people affected by disaster need most.
In the wake of a hurricane, your monetary donation can make a huge difference to those in need. To donate, visit supporthurricanerelief.org. That's supporthurricanerelief.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back to the Practical Intuitive Mind, Body, Spirit for the Real World. It's Robin Fritz, and I'm chatting with Nick Jankel in London. Yay, all the way here to Seattle. Isn't like modern technology great, Nick? So we're talking about science, philosophy, and spirituality, and coming together to offer insight into life's questions. So, Nick, not off the topic, but here's the thing. I do soul regression hypnotherapy as part of my practice. And as an intuitive, I can also see things. So here's the really interesting thing I've learned with many, many client sessions. When people are curious about their past lives, all right, and it isn't just for trauma. I love to help people tap past life skills and bring them into the present, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have to hold a big space for that. You have for people to explore. So here's the thing. Over and over again, we will talk to someone's past life. I mean, that person in a past life.
Right.
So wanting to understand how they worked with energy, for example. Mm-hmm. Every single person we talk to, okay, and they're starting to talk, and then I can ask questions too. These people are living in small little towns in Europe or whatever, farming communities, very simple lives. They do not bat an eye at turning around and talking to themselves 400 years in the future. And I am just like, holy cow, this is so cool. And they'll talk to me and they'll say, this is how I do that. They're not at all shocked. Now, we get all messed up right now in our current times. Is time real? Is there past, present, or future? Like, and my attitude is like, come on, we have to live that way, so why worry about it? But here's the thing. I believe, and I want you to talk about this, I believe the problem started with the Industrial Revolution, where it kind of divorced us from the whole complete person that we are and can be. These people weren't divorced from that, so they're not surprised at talking to themselves. I've talked to myself 1,000 years in the past, and I know for me it's real. People will say maybe it's not, but these people have real experiences. So what happened? What happened? I know there's the philosophy of the time. We're talking about Cartesian philosophy. We're talking about all kinds of things. What did you find happened?
Well, my sense is that the divorce within us, the chasm, the split,
right.
the psychological split, started a bit before the Industrial Revolution.
Right.
And so in the birth of the Enlightenment, so not spiritual enlightenment, but the philosophical enlightenment in Europe, and then America, where we sort of went, you know what, we can't just believe what the king says or what the bishop says, which was great, very freeing for us, right? It was like, okay, we can have to find our own truth, and we've got to use our reason and whatever. And people sort of threw off the shackles of traditional religion, which was very oppressive. I'm not sure many people realize, but you could be put in prison if you didn't go. Even in England in the 1800s, you could be put in prison if you didn't go to the church in your parish every Sunday. and you have to show up, or the
Right.
squire or the lord could put you in prison. So
Well,
very
and look
oppressive
what
religion.
they did to people like
Exactly.
Galileo, and it took, 500
Exactly.
years to put Nicholas Copernicus back in a Christian cemetery?
Exactly. So
Exactly,
quite rightly,
right.
people were like, we don't want that. We don't want this patriarchal, oppressive religious experience, which, in my personal experience of my original faith, my family's faith, just didn't have any wisdom for me. It didn't have any juiciness.
Right.
It didn't have any succor. It didn't feel like it was helping me when I was 15, 16, understand life, understand myself, understand who I really was. And so I had the divorce. I had like a divorce within me. My heart was like,
Right.
so I'd been dancing a lot. I'd been to lots of raves and festivals and Burning Man and that kind of stuff. I'd been having shamanic experiences. I'd been mountaineering, traveling in Africa and connecting with people. I've had all these what I would now call quintessentially spiritual experiences. But they didn't seem to make any sense to me because I couldn't explain them away with science. And science wants to explain. It doesn't want to understand, it wants to explain. And there's a
And
big
you were
difference between the
intent
two
on
things.
having science explain it to you?
I was in the early days, and then late 20s, early 30s, I sort of hit a brick wall of psychological pain and angst. And I was like, you know what? I'm a scientist. I've been a medic. I'm relatively wealthy. I've been a tech entrepreneur. I'm like in the fast lane of life, and I'm still miserable inside. I can't do it for another second. I need to go and find out within what's going on. And that sort of rock bottom misery sort of propelled me to blast through some of my assumptions about spirituality and some of the practices which I just rejected as just not my thing at all. And out the other end, 15 years later, I've sort of put together this, what I believe is quite a rigorous philosophy. So for me, the challenge is you can. I'm not the sort of person who can just go, okay, I'm going to go and do a past life regression, or I'm going to have cranial sacral therapy. And I like to understand what's going on in those experiences. I like to have some framework with which to understand. Yeah. So my wife is an intuitive healer, right? So she doesn't care really much about the framework. She's not. I have quite a sort of masculine mind, not male, masculine sense of wanting to have some kind of a Christmas tree to put the lights on, if you like. Where she didn't really mind. So I went on a big journey to sort of create the Christmas tree. Now she actually really enjoys having a Christmas tree to put her lights on as well. So we work together a lot. And so I came out with this idea of spiritual atheism, which is quite rigorous. It's meant to be, quote unquote, a Bible for people who think they're spiritual, not religious. It's like a set of principles that we can agree on.
Okay, spiritual but not religious. So you mean
spiritual but not religious, embracing science, but embracing the perennial truth that if you, listening right now, spend enough disciplined time going inside yourself, quieting down and listening and feeling into what you feel inside, and you can get there with meditation, which is a very quiet way, or you can get there a very hot, ecstatic way, or you can get there in connection with others, or in nature. However you decide to go, but it takes discipline. It's not going to be just a first moment, thing. You will find that you experience yourself as continuous with everything that has ever been, that will ever be, that could ever be. And that feeling of absolute non-duality, oneness, unity, we call in our human words love. And that feeling is what then helps us heal and transform ourselves and then transform the world. So it's a really important thing. It can't be something to be left to chance. Maybe you'll get there, go sit in a cave for a while, and maybe you'll get there. We need people to find their way there, because without that experience, we can't get out of trauma, we can't heal ourselves, we get locked in old addictions, and then the world's falling apart because of those addictions. So this is a really urgent thing. It's not it's not just about our own sort of seeking. It's urgent. We've got 9 billion people, and we need a lot of people to wake up and fully experience this love, because it's the only thing that makes a difference long term.
That is true. And I think here comes my cat that we talked about earlier. Sorry. Sorry. I am a little less distracted now that my terror of my lost cat has disappeared. And that's all live radio. Here you go. She was behind me in the room all the time. Talk about faith, Nick. Anyway, okay. So you're right. You're right. Love is the thing. And that's the thing I find no matter what I do in my work. And I work as a medium too. So I talk to the dead a lot. And especially the dead who haven't made it to the afterlife.
Right.
And the whole concept of all of that is love, and what love means, and how to cling to that and make it a way of life and a way of death, afterlife, so to speak.
Right.
And I think the problem with even contemporary religions is there's too much push and shove, and less helping people learn to be self-reliant and to love themselves, and then that attitude acts as yeast and kind of filters out through society.
Right.
Feels like it's going to take an awful long time, though. And religion is more focused on authority figures and following a certain way. So your experimentation is...
Yeah, you could be a very religious person and you have done absolutely no work on yourself. You are riddled with trauma and patterning and conditioning. In fact, I'll tell you something. So this is a live story. So as an Englishman, I have actually lived in New York, San Francisco, and LA. So I have a deep love affair with America. I married an American, which was the best thing I've ever done.
Cool. Congratulations.
Thank you. She's a wonderful soul. And she's a healer, and I get free craniosacral therapy every day. So I'm very... Oh,
wow. Well, aren't you lucky? Now you got me thinking maybe I should look for that.
Exactly. You should put on Tinder. Only healers and those with body-mind skills, please apply.
There we go.
So I'm a dear friend of mine. Grew up in a very strict Christian sort of subgroup, and I won't say exactly which one, but very strict, very much, there's only one way. You're either in with the rules or you're out. There's no finding your own rules. There's no finding your own way. And these people, this my dear friend's parents, have put that rule book ahead of giving their son constant, continuous love and connection.
Exactly.
And in fact, they've cut him off. And in my world, as a spiritual atheist, there could be nothing more in misalignment to the universe than cutting your child off from the love that they deserve from you, and they are, and you are. It's like you couldn't find something probably more distorted in my understanding of what the universe wants when you listen to it. And this is where, so in the book I talk about the difference between rules and... Right.
Go ahead.
So I talk a lot about the difference between rules and principles. Religion does rules. For me, spiritual disciplines do principles. So one of the challenges we've got in the world with the current spirituality, the spiritual, not religious piece that I was in, is it can be very easy to have a kind of salad bar approach. So you walk around the salad bar and you go, I'll have a little bit of this Sufi stuff, and I'll have a little bit of this Zen stuff, a little bit of Kabbalah, and I really like this stuff as well. But you can easily avoid the discipline of having to do the work inside, the healing work that can take many, many years. And so for me, I wanted to have, and I think there's now about 60 of them, 60 principles to live your life by. They're not rules. They need to be interpreted, and they need to be brought into the life each moment by you. Because the you that you are now is different from the you you're going to be in 2 years. You'll have a different intuitive reading when you look at a principle. But if we don't have anything to build our lives on, then, like I did, I was all over the place, basically. I was sort of wandering between spiritual practice and this thing and this workshop and whatever, and I was actually in some ways suffering more than when I was a rigid science-loving atheist. So I think principles are important, but as soon as they become rules, we've lost the point, because rules are dead, and we need aliveness, because the universe is alive.
Right. Well, and then there's so much variation on how people search and find that a rule is gonna limit them.
Absolutely.
So there are scientists, though, who believe in a God, so to speak, or a particular religion, and they're very devout. Mm-hmm. So in your thinking, what are they missing?
Well, I don't.
Or are they actually pulling it together?
It depends. That's the thing. You have no idea. I know people who are very devout religiously and have the most beautiful hearts, open-hearted, loving, compassionate human beings. And I know people who are very devout religiously who are cold and rigid and unloving and full of bitterness and ego. So that's the challenge with devout religiosity is it's so far away from the spirituality that I think was originally in it, that you don't know anymore where someone's at in their world. I mean, I put in the book a similar thing, which is, you can be a hipster and have a beautiful open heart. You can be a hippie and be cold and jealous and mean and egotistical. Our aesthetic choices, where we live, the kind of house we have, our car, whatever, it doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't necessarily a good sign of what our heart does, right? And how our heart can reach out to another human being. And that's really the key for me is, how do you, someone said it, I don't know, I read it years ago, a judge of character is how do you treat someone who you don't think can do you any benefits to your career or your finances or your how do you treat those people? That's a really good question for us all.
How are you really in the world?
Yeah, do you let your heart come out to the valet parking guy, or do you only keep it for people who can do something for you? That's one of the great questions of living spirituality.
And that isn't science or anything else. That's character.
Nothing to do with it.
Hang on, we'll be right back after the break, and I want to talk about consciousness and what you call the mind-body problem and the placebo effect. So hang on, we'll be right back.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Hi, this is recording artist and composer Yuval Ran, inviting you to a voyage through the chakras, a new double album of guided meditations to transform your life, a sublime musical medicine for nourishing inner peace and reaching to your higher virtues. Get it now at metamindfulnessmusic.com, METTA mindfulnessmusic.com.
911. What is your emergency?
My kid shot himself.
All right, where's the wounds?
911, what's your emergency?
Please help. My son shot his brother.
911, what is your emergency? Okay.
911, please state your emergency.
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns.
It wasn't locked.
Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Welcome back to the Practical Intuitive Mind, Body, Spirit for the Real World. And today I'm talking about science, philosophy, and spirituality with author and thought leader Nick Jankel. And Nick, I'm sorry because my show started with a trauma here. Did I even say your last name right?
Yeah, you totally did.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
I was going over the roller coaster ride of the ad break. Suddenly I'm in the gunshots of youth, and then I'm Sandy. I know Sandy Sedgbeer. I'm like an English voice. It was very intense.
There you go. Right. Love the English voices. There you go. And there's so much going on in the world today. And thinking about what you were talking about, the search for healing, the search for self-healing. A lot of people don't have the time or the interest to go real deep. I mean, they don't. I mean, and a lot of people are survival mode. I mean, most of us in what we call first world countries, as they say in my upcoming book, we have basic needs taken care of. We have house cats and grocery stores. But that search, still, we're busy. We're busy going to work. Mm-hmm. We're busy taking care of the home. We don't have time to go spend a lot of time on anything. So that deep lifelong quest that isn't going to work for a lot of people. So where are we going to take them? How are we going to help them? And how does that relate to consciousness? So we know most people aren't going to be able to dig as deep as you or I do in our daily lives. But consciousness applies to everything, actually, because everything I talk with out there in the world is conscious, whether it's a volcano or a hurricane or a cat or another human. So how do you describe consciousness, and what does that have to do with your spiritual atheism philosophy?
Whew. Don't know what to start.
Yeah, it's nothing like getting you up in the middle of the night to have a conversation and then making up my own questions. Okay. You're going to put a little dick by not my name, aren't you?
Yeah.
Not going back to talk to her.
So consciousness for me is the interior experience we have of being in the world.
Right.
And for me, when we are experiencing consciousness, we shift into a different mode, which I call connective consciousness.
Okay.
And we experience a continuity of consciousness. So I'm not saying that the desk I'm standing right by or the phone is conscious in the way I'm conscious, but it has the interior capacity for consciousness to some degree. Because otherwise we have to suddenly explain how consciousness comes out of nothing, which doesn't make any sense to me. You know, we can't have wet neurons.
Yeah, you have to live in my world a little while, Nick. Come join me in my world a little while, and you won't have so much problem with that.
Well, for me, actually, it makes much more sense that everything in the world is conscious. And in fact...
Exactly. And that is exactly right.
Exactly.
Which is why quantum physics... Way, right? Is why I always say quantum physics is bunk. Because the atom is conscious.
So for me, there must always be consciousness in everything.
Exactly.
But it's only when you get complex forms that you get the kind of consciousness that can do what we can do, like talking and stuff.
Well, again, spend a day with me. Okay? Spend a day with me and you'll think differently.
One of my favorite quotes is a Taoist saying, it says, think like a mountain. So
exactly.
So I think we're probably saying similar things. But
probably not.
We have a we have a material body, and it has consciousness permeating through it. So does everything in the world. And so when we look at material, we see separation and we see distinction between my atoms and your atoms. But when we experience consciousness on the inside, we feel continuity. And that, for me, is the whole point of my work, is to say that both are right. There is separation. You look at it in a microscope, and the cell is separate from the glass. You experience consciousness, and you experience yourself as being at one with the cell. And the two are right. Both are right. You know, the scientific lens can be right in some settings, and it's important. But our experience of continuity on the inside is also right. And that creates us with a great challenge. How do we live with both of those being right? And what most people tend to do is they discount one of them. So a traditional spiritual teacher maybe would say, well, the material world is illusion, and only consciousness is real. And I go, well, that doesn't really feel right to me.
Yeah, it doesn't work for me either.
Yeah, it doesn't feel right to me, particularly for me when I think about the amount of people suffering, the amount of children who are being abused a second.
Right.
That's very much occurring in material world. It is occurring.
Right, and yeah.
It's not an illusion.
The material world is not perfect.
Exactly. And then, but then a lot of the materialists, the scientists go, well, then consciousness must be an illusion. And there's one guy, a guy called Daniel Dennett, a very well-regarded philosopher of consciousness, but a materialist, like I've wedded to the belief that only material things exist. He literally will happily say on a podcast that the voice he's speaking with through the mind that is thinking is an illusion. And it's just a weird, quirky fate of how brains work. And that, for me, is just patently ludicrous. So you then
I'm glad I'm not the only one in the world.
But a lot of people do believe that, right? They believe everything is just matter. So for me,
I know,
the whole point is you have to live with both. You have to live in this material world. There's no point pretending that there's not an ocean of plastic in the ocean. Sorry, an island of plastic. There's no point pretending that people aren't being abused or hurt or killed or maimed. There's no point pretending that 85,000 kids didn't die last week in the Yemen. But at the same time, we also must live consciousness. We have to live our inner experience. And so for me, my philosophy of spiritual atheism is an attempt to say you have to live both in every moment. You can't pretend one doesn't exist. And that's a huge challenge
that makes
for us.
sense.
But
why do you insist? Okay, go ahead. Carry on. Well, I want to know why you call it atheism.
Because for me, it's important that my audience that I have believe is most underserved by the current, let's say, philosophers in the world, are those who don't believe in God but have felt something that I would call spirituality, but they can't make sense of those two things, and so they live in suffering. So there's lots of philosophers writing for the science lovers, and there's lots of philosophers writing for the people who only believe in consciousness and spirituality. And my audience are the people who want both, who live both, but haven't been able to put it together. Okay. So for me, I still believe I'm an atheist. I feel love every minute of my day. Actually, that's a lie. There's moments where my heart closes and I don't feel love, but then I get back to feeling love. And so I feel a kind of, I guess you could call it a religiosity in my everyday moments. But I don't believe in a God. I don't believe in priests. I don't believe in a revealed text. I don't believe in scripture. I don't believe in a rule book. So that, for me, is what atheists believe. But I don't believe that, as most atheists do, that means there's nothing other than random atoms that happen to create us, and there's no meaning in the universe.
Okay, it totally makes sense.
Yeah, which I used to believe. But you asked another really, really interesting question, which I think is very poignant. Is you and I obviously geeks in our work. We love geeking out and going down rabbit holes around all these.
There are never rabbit holes, Nick. Only another way of looking at it.
Exactly. That's what you find when you come out the rabbit hole. You're like, "Whoa, that was quite something." Great. But my work is designed for people who don't want to do that. So I kind of believe that my work is to do the heavy lifting,
right. That's
and
good.
sort of simplify stuff, and make it very accessible. So I work with organizations, I work with people all over the world, and my work is uber accessible. But, and it's a
That's
massive
cool.
but, if anyone believes they can have a life truly liberated from trauma and pain and suffering by just doing a couple of minutes a month sort of inner practice, I don't think it's going to happen. And I stake my life on making it quick and easy and cheap, but it still takes practice. That's why it's called practice, right?
It does, right.
Life.
I've had a very tough life, and when I look at people who are like, oh, it's what's meant to be, or it'll all work out, or the universe is always doing great things for you, and I'm thinking, oh my God, you people have never had a hangnail. Number one. And number two, let's put it all in perspective. We're born, crap happens, fun happens, we die. Where in that do we find meaning? Where do we find a purpose? Where do we go from there? We're almost out of time, Nick. So tell me, as we've had this conversation, I appreciate your patience with me having my little trauma before the show started. But we had a kind of an explosion in the building that I live in, which sent my little one into a trauma. So what is the thing that you want to leave my audience with today?
I guess this idea of both and. It's a really important point. You don't have to believe in either science and science's view of happiness or purpose or anything, but nor do you have to discount it. You can blend science, and I personally have gone through scores, hundreds of science papers, and none of them contradict what I've learned from the wisdom traditions and the deep reading of old texts and deep meditation, and they fit together, because they have to fit together because there's only one reality. So how could they not fit together? So don't believe the hype that there's a war between spirituality and science. The war is over. We can live with both. And at the same time, I invite you to really get committed to this work, because it is the only path I know to lasting freedom and lasting senses of purpose. And like you said, I don't believe everything happens for a reason, but I believe you can use everything that happens for a reason to become more free.
Well, you could learn from it, right?
Exactly. To become more free and to become less conditioned into attachment.
Right. And I think that's where we need to go. I think where people are struggling today is they want to believe, they don't know what to believe, so they believe the person who appeals to them the most, and usually they look to be very narrow-minded and hateful in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
I know I'm thinking about politics and how the United States is just kind of disintegrating, which may not be necessarily a bad thing, but not something that, what is that Chinese curse? May you live in interesting times.
For sure. I mean, there's definitely, what's happening at the moment is definitely a melting down of the old patterning of the world.
Right.
I just hope we can find some leaders who very soon can usher us into a more transformational way of understanding the world. And we can't go backwards to some mythical time when America was great and Britain was great. We've got to go forwards. We've got to go in. We've got to go down the rabbit hole, and we've got to find within us
and make your arms big enough to hold the whole world, right?
Exactly. Our
if we can do that.
And our social freedom. They are interlinked.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. I would love you to come back and have more fun with me. But please tell people how to find you.
So, if you're interested in the book, I think you'll enjoy it. It's on Amazon is the easiest, but you can order it from any bookshop. It's called Spiritual Atheist by Nick Jankel. And please leave a review, honest review, if you do buy it. But if you're interested in my personal development work, my leadership development work, keynote speaking, etc., switchonnow.com. That's www.switchonnow.com. And I'm excited to say that in February, I will be doing a 3-day mini retreat on all this stuff in Santa Cruz in California at 1440 Multiversity. So do join me there.
Awesome. Good. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's Nick Jankel. That's spelled Jankel for those of you who are Googling him right now. So, Nick, thank you so much for joining me and for staying up late in London. Have a great week. And
your cat came back.
And come back and join me again. Thank you, and take care.
Bye.
And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Next week on my show, I've got a couple of guests coming up here. Oh my gosh, November, December, January. Oh my gosh, the end of the year is here so quickly. Next week, I'm talking with Stephen Taylor on spiritual activism, science, and spirituality. And on December 10th, with Rebecca Gamir, who calls herself a professional wanderer. So hang in, join us. You find my services at my website, robinfritz.com. That's ROBYNFRITZ.com. Personal and business intuition, mediumship, animal communication, space clearing, past life and between life regression, soul clearing, energy healing. It's all there. Thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next week. Take care.